Hello, everyone. It's been a very long time since I was last with you. It's a real pleasure to be back at my usual Sunday night slot. I hope you are all okay. Times are really hard. We are really sorry to hear about the earthquake in Izmir. I hear that the death rate has gone up to over 50. But our heartfelt condolences to all those families. It's a really bad situation. We are about to go into lockdown from next Thursday in England. So times are very challenging. But we are here with a brand new program and we are starting with a bang. And tonight, our subject is a really special one. I've got 6 very special guests. We all share the same, we all share something with all my guests. We are all Afro Cypriots, Cypriots of African origin. And we've organized this program as part of our contribution to the Black History Month. I know we've missed Black History Month just by a day, but nevertheless, we are here and we wanted to have a contribution to the rich Black history, our history. So with my guests, I'm going to discuss our specific Black history, Afro Cypriot history. And I have, as I said, 6 very special guests. The program is going to be in 2 parts. In the first part, I'm going to have 3 of my guests. And in the second part, I'll have the other 3. So my 3 first guests are Serap. Hello, Serap.
Hi, Ertanç. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Yusuf Nidai and
Hello,
Serap
everyone.
Kanay. Hi, Yusuf. Hello. Now, we've got another guest, Umut O, but we'll connect her as soon as we can. So we'll start with my 2 guests on the screen you can see. Serap and Yusuf, I hope you are okay. What I'd like you to do first is to very briefly introduce yourself, say a few words about what you do, where you are based, and answer this question for me. Basically, make a comment on this. Among your multiple identities, how high is your Afro Cypriot identity? How important is it to you and why? You've got 3 minutes each to elaborate on this after you introduce yourself. Shall we start with you, Serap?
Start with Yusuf this time.
Yeah, okay.
Me on this.
Oh, okay.
All right, Yusuf.
Well, ladies first, Serap.
Never
on.
mind. The lady
That's
has
okay.
given you the...
I've been here before, so you go first.
All right. So I'm the new one. Okay. My name is Yusuf Nidai. I'm Afro Cypriot. I was born in Cyprus, in Nicosia, but my parents are from Lefke. Actually, my father, who's a black guy, he's from Flasu, and my mum is white. So here I am in between, and I'm proud of it, being part of 2 races. But my black dominance is on top, I reckon, as you mentioned at the beginning. I've always been proud of my black identity. When I was little, I had some difficulties. I had some difficulties when I was a migrant in 2 different countries, first to Turkey, then Australia. But I always came on top of it and always defended my black identity. That's all. I mean, there's not much to say about me. I'm living in Cyprus now. I came back to my roots, and I'm living in a little village in Cyprus.
Okay. Yusuf, I read on Facebook yesterday that one of your friends quoted you. You apparently said that I realized I was black when I went to Ankara.
Not
read
really.
the-
I mean, I write poems as well, and in one of the poems that I've written when I was living in Australia, I was talking about the migration and my migrant identity. And in there, I mentioned that it was hard to be black, but it was also proud to be black because my father taught me to be brave.
Right. Excellent. Thanks, Yusuf. We'll come back to you a bit later on. Serap, I mean, you've done this so many times. You answered the same question so many times. So
I'll try.
You try to answer it again for the
I'll
sake.
try with a little bit of a difference
Okay.
this time. Okay.
Good.
I am from Cyprus as well. I was born in Famagusta. We share same roots with similar roots with Yusuf. We are actually cousins. Our fathers are from Flasu together. My mother is from Kukla area. She has African heritage on one side of her things. So I'm also mixed heritage. My Afro Cypriotness comes on top of everything else that I have as an identity alongside being a woman. So it's on the same par. What were the questions again? The other ones?
Yes, you answered. I asked how high in the sort of multiplicity of identities, how high is your Afro Cypriot identity?
Yeah, so
how
it's
important it is to you.
It's in the same level as being a woman, my woman identity as a woman.
Yeah.
I'm an artist, I'm a researcher, I write, I draw, I talk, I take pictures, I love swimming. So these are all parts of how I live my life, basically, and how I try to make sense of life, especially through these times that we going through, about a year now almost. So yeah.
Yes, you forgot to mention your exercise regime in the mornings.
Well, I swim most days, and I cycle and I walk twice a week. Regularly.
Yes, obviously. I mean, this, as I said earlier, we are doing this as part of the Black History Month, and although we missed it by one day, that doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't.
We wanted to have a contribution to our Black history. So why has it taken us so long to dig into our history? I know you, Serap, has been doing it for a long, long time. You started maybe 20 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So why do you think this has taken us so long, in order to, I'm sure a lot of us have been thinking about it, but we actually haven't done much in terms of identifying our history. Is that because lack of material, lack of archives? Why did it take us so long?
Okay, I think what it is that individually, not just me, but other people who has Afro Cypriot heritage probably try to look into their past and where they come from and their heritage. But one thing is that it is hard to find enough records here. That's one of the difficulties that I faced. The other thing is that living in Cyprus, those of us who live in Cyprus, we have the Cyprus problem all the time, which have been the dominance in our lives, before birth, all through how many ever decades that we've been here. So I think it's very difficult within that for people to engage in research, in finding out and claiming that identity. Also with the Cyprus problem of having sort of Turkish-speaking Cypriots and Greek-speaking Cypriots and the conflict between them, those of us who are in the Turkish-speaking community of Cyprus tended that we needed to sort of align ourselves with the other Turkish-speaking Cypriots rather than being completely separate from them. I think this has been one of the factors, not for myself, but for many people. And one other factor, I think, is that in the beginning, at least, most of our families were rural people. They didn't come from cities. Not all of us, but most of our families are from villages. So I think, again, with the kind of work and the jobs that they were engaged, it wasn't really that possible for people to kind of go into this, and there were other concerns basically about people's livelihoods.
Okay, so you are saying
it's not that we're not interested.
Absolutely. Basically, you are saying that the conflict in Cyprus has pushed aside all the other considerations.
Definitely.
Yusuf, is there a factor in this in terms of psychologically we have not been prepared to basically accept that we are different from the rest of the Cypriots? Is there a psychological aspect to this on the part of us, Afro Cypriots?
I don't think so. I mean, my story is a little different. Although there was a conflict in Cyprus, we had to leave Cyprus because of that conflict when I was 4 years old, because of my father's work, and we migrated to Turkey. And when we went to Turkey, my black identity was a barrier in front of me because there wasn't many blacks in Turkey when I went there. And although I'm a very quiet person, and I was like that in my childhood as well. Every day I was coming home having a fight outside with the other kids, because kids are, very straightforward, and they're very natural. And what they hear from their families, they reflect on the other kids. Yeah. So they were teasing me because my father was black, and I was having a fight defending my black identity. So that's how I grow. And being a rebel started with my defending my black identity. I continued in my life, and I'm still a rebel against all the odds in life. I'm always defending the people who's disadvantaged. And I've been doing that throughout my life. I was like that in Turkey. I grew up in there. I was not only black in there, but I was also a migrant in Turkey. Although I was Turkish, with a Turkish descent, but I was still fighting for my identity. Then I migrated to Australia.
Right.
And in Australia, it was quite okay because there are a lot of blacks in there. Yeah.
When you say okay, obviously you don't mean there was no racism or discrimination in Australia.
Well, I mean, there was Australia is a very multicultural country, so there is, of course, racism and discrimination everywhere in the world. But in there, because of the Aborigines as well, the native Australians, the real Australians, and fighting for their rights in there. So it was better than Turkey.
Okay. Yes, it's funny you should say that. We've got Umut with us. Umut, can you hear us? Can you hear me, Umut? Umut? You need to. You need to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Umut,
Okay.
we started by me asking people to introduce themselves briefly and say in the order of priorities in terms of identity, how high does your Black identity come, and why is it important to you? Can you explain in a few words?
Sure. I'm Umut O, born and raised in Cyprus, Turkish Cypriot. It took me a long time to realize it as a social identity, actually, right?
Okay.
But I was always aware about Blackness through the family, right? My father's side is from African origin. So let me tell you this way. Looking back and looking from my academic lens, like you have a lot of identities, but once you have a community, then that identity becomes a social identity. And I don't think we ever had that when I was growing up. We did know of different Black people around us, but we were all very few, right? So we weren't a collected entity who are living sort of gathered together. And the color was always in a matter of being teased, right? Or being looked down upon, actually. I remember it that way. So at first, I didn't know how to identify with it, obviously, right? There was always this idea that said, particularly my sister is a very beautiful woman, right? So that they said, she's dark, but
No.
beautiful. And I always ask my mom, what does this but mean, right? So that's how sort of I started understanding that there are sort of differences of how this is negotiated. And I always ask my father, where do we come from? There was never an answer, right? Where did your ancestor came from? All we know that they actually came from ships and they landed to Cyprus, but they didn't know how or where. So that's another interesting thing, I think, that we never talked about our past, how we came as workers or slaves, right? So maybe it was sort of a hush-hush thing, probably, to talk about that I collected. And it was always like this thing in my life that didn't have a social sort of anything. But I did see a few years ago, Serap's related to Serap's exhibition, the pictures. I didn't know it when it was happening. I was living abroad in the US. So when I saw the article about it, I got so excited and I connected to her and I said, I cannot believe it, right? That there is this consciousness. And I was really appreciative to see that. And that was my first very moment, I think, to say, oh my God, we are Afro Cypriots. There are people, you know, that we are a community, that we need to be. So it was very late for me to see it as a community, as an idea of a community. But I was always sort of sensitive. When I was living in the US, I seen a lot of racism and I studied it. Yes.
Umut, I'd like to ask you.
And through that, I did learn a lot about racism.
Okay. What I'd like to ask you, Umut, your grandfather, for example, must be one of the most well-known Black Cypriots, Afro Cypriots of African origin. And I'm surprised you saying that that hasn't really translated into your life in terms of talking about it. You said when you asked your dad where we came from, there was no answer. That surprised me a bit.
All right. So my grandfather is Arapali, right? And that a lot of people know it through the songs. It's a very famous song. But go back to my childhood, right? So then grandfather was always in our life as Arapali, but it was never sort of located within a community that I'm talking in this sense. And he died very early. My father was a baby when he died. So we did know him as an idea, right? And so we didn't have any pictures. Now there is a picture going around, but that picture came to our life very late when I was actually in high school, because my great aunt, which I call Nene because she lived with us, and that's where I actually, after my father, seen a dark-skinned individual, right? In my life, up close and personal, and I lived with her 3 years. So she was much more a figurehead for me to be understanding my roots, where I am coming from, and we did have some sort of a differences, but she never talks about us as Afro Cypriots, right? I don't think anybody had this kind of a conscious understanding of it. So the grandfather, we knew him as a dark-skinned individual, but he was more famous with his bravery, you know, protecting the poor, or going after the rights of everybody. You know, the lyrics of the song, but it was not popularized as it was after a while. Like, it's been around 2000 onwards that it actually became much more popularized in the culture. But Hala Nene for us was somebody who was huge with. She taught me, for example, to love myself as I am, because she was a very self-worthy individual. She wasn't very educated, but she was very, self-assured. She was the matriarch of the family. So through her, I did learn a lot self-respect. Right?
Okay. What I'd like to ask you, people from the Caribbean always talk about the disadvantage they have about not knowing their true identity, as opposed to people from Africa. Do we, as Black Cypriots, have the same kind of problem? Do we feel that it's a disadvantage for us not to know our true identity? I mean, we all know where we sort of come from. Most of us are from Sudan. But I learned that from my father. He always talked about the fact that we were from Sudan. But our connection with Sudan and Egypt and all those other places we are supposed to have come from, we don't have any connections with those lands. So, do you think we have a disadvantage about sort of lack of knowledge about this identity? So, can I start with Yusuf first? Let me ask Yusuf first, and then I'll come back to
you. Well,
and Serap. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to start. I mean, Serap knows that as well, as she mentioned, we're cousins. It was in 1996 when I was living in Australia. I came to Cyprus, and my grandfather and a great auntie, Ulviye, they were both alive in that time. And just before a wedding, a family wedding, I just set them down under a beautiful tree in a shade, and I asked them questions about our identity, our roots. Dede, our grandfather, didn't know much, but Ulviye Nene, Ulviye Hala knew a lot, and started written them down. And it goes back to our great-grandfather, I think. Serap knows better. I passed that information to the family as well. I think Serap got all that information as well. We don't know actually where they come from, but it's very interesting that they all got married to the black people. Until my father was the first one, because my father was the eldest in the recent family, like Serap's father, my uncle as well. So he is the eldest one. He was the eldest one, rest in peace. So he married to a white woman. So he broke up that chain. So up to that point, they all married to black people. So they kept within themselves up to that point. I'm talking about early 50s, 52, that they got married. So and it wasn't a usual thing to do, because they were very conservative within themselves, the black people in that time, as I heard from my father, of course. I mean, the information that we gathered from them. So, but they kept telling them themselves, I mean, within the family, that who got married to who, how many children they had. And we came to a point when Ulviye Hala, rest in peace, was telling me about this family history, that there was a woman, I think that was her mother or her auntie, I forgot now, but she got married 5 times. Being a black woman within a Muslim community, and with her own will, she divorced those people and married again and again 5 times. That was very brave for a woman. The reason was purely because the others didn't give her any children till the last one. So, and she all married to black people as well. So it was very interesting, I found. But talking about my black identity, I don't know if you're going to ask me questions about Australia later.
Yeah.
Or you want me to talk about it now?
Very
can
briefly.
I just tell you?
Yeah,
or later
very
on?
briefly, Yusuf. Yeah.
Okay,
you can talk about it now.
It was very interesting that in 1981, when I migrated to Australia, after working few months in a factory with no English, I decided to learn English. So I started a full-time course in a adult migrant education center. I enrolled myself. Then I looked at the metro, how to get to that place. And there were 2 ways to get there. And one of them was very close to the school, that station, called Redfern in Sydney. So I decided to use Redfern station and walk from there to the school. But I couldn't see anybody else around from that course. I was just walking through side streets, and there was one particular street that there were a lot of Aborigines there. In fact, the whole neighborhood was an Aboriginal neighborhood. But they were very friendly to me. I was smoking then. I was giving them smoke, and they were making a cup of coffee for me. And it was a great opportunity for me to, correct my English in there as well. And after two months, they said to me, "Where do you come from?" I said, "I come from Redfern, through Evelyn Street." And they were shocked. They said, "Aren't you scared?" I said, "Why?" They said, "It's full of Aborigines there, and it's very dangerous, that street. There are a lot of trouble in that street all the time," which I had none. They probably thought that I was one of them, you see. So I felt very comfortable, really. I mean, they were very scared, but I was very comfortable, and that was an advantage, being a black. So and I was proud of my identity then.
Okay, right, Serap, let me ask you quickly. What do we say to? I mean, you have come across with a lot of people during your research, Afro Cypriots who claim not to have encountered any racism. So, what do you say to people like that? People who are from Afro Cypriot origin, and who claim that they have not encountered any racism. What do you say to them? How do you deal with this?
Well, nowadays, I think I just smile. I said, okay. Somebody told me that very recently, in fact, and I just said, okay, fine, just didn't kind of deal with it. I think it's kind of 2 things maybe. One is ignorance, and the other one is of like not knowing your true identity and also not really owning up to who you are. If you really own up to who you are, then you're bound to notice maybe not direct racism, but at least prejudice in your life, because it exists. Nobody can get away from it. I mean, growing up in Cyprus, teasing, both Yusuf and Umut mentioned this, and we're all different shades because we're actually all mixed raced. We're mixed heritage, and not just sort of, it's not just the African heritage that we share. But one thing is that people are afraid of difference. And this has been the case all the time. So because we look different, then the other people tease us. So those of us who maybe don't feel strong enough, maybe then they just ignore that difference and they want to be part of the whole. Like Umut was saying, being a community didn't happen. Like, we're not a collective, a separate collective in Cyprus. I think you mentioned this at very first interview I did with you, back in then, that your dad was concerned and he wrote to the interior minister,
exactly.
Yorgajis, and asked for a village for us to all have, those people that were there. But this consciousness did not exist among all the people because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, that people had other things to deal with. So except for Piskobu, for example, or Hirsofu, where people did live together, even in those places, there wasn't that strong sort of identification of African heritage, the Africanness. And I still say, okay, Yusuf had a different experience because they had to leave, but the Cyprus problem has been overshadowing everything we have to deal with here. It's the same thing with feminism, with sexism, with racism. It's the whole thing. It just gets an umbrella thingy. We have to sort out Cyprus conflict before we can deal with anything else. It's rubbish because we're living, it's like my life is almost 6 decades and it's been here and it's not going to go away by the looks of things. And meanwhile, so many things happened. And even as Cypriots in Cyprus, we have moved a long way. Because of that, I think we can afford it. Let's put it that way. We can afford to notice that we are different. We can afford to notice that it's not been so easy because of our differences always. It's not that we have to be quiet or we have to be the person that kind of shies away, but it's okay to acknowledge. And I think that's what I found when I did the first exhibition, that I think is the one that Umut is talking about, back in 2005, when I said, we are here and we are Afro Cypriots. And with that one, so many people came forward because it was okay now to talk about it. It was okay now to actually, even people that you wouldn't walking on the street think, oh, they're Afro Cypriots. They came up and said, hey, we're also got some connection. Our nene, dede, so many people back then. We're part of it. So I think it's that once you notice who you are, once you accept what connections you might have within your identity, and feel yourself as part of a social connection, then you cannot miss the racism or the prejudice that does exist.
Thanks, Serap. Umut, in the last few months, over a year, you and I have been sort of heavily involved in challenging some of what's going on in Cyprus in terms of racism, in terms of the Africa newspaper, for example. And we were obviously quite shocked that people we might have associated as being on the left or the spectrum could have such attitude. And do we as Afro Cypriots, do you think we have a additional special role in challenging racism and discrimination in Cyprus, both in Cyprus or among the diaspora Cypriots? Umut, did you? I think you might not have got all my question. Umut, can you hear me?
It's actually a very good question, and I will try to pick up where Serap is actually sort of leaving, right? I think that role needs to be assumed by us if we want to really own up to this identity, right? Otherwise,
Okay, I think we are having technical problems. Umut has gone, unfortunately. Serap, last question I'll ask you. You started talking about the positive effect the group you and I started, the Afro Cypriots Facebook group, has had in raising awareness, especially among young people. So since Black History Month is about also achievements, can you talk about our achievement as the Afro Cypriot group? How has that helped people in your experience?
Okay, one of the things I want to kind of connect it to is the question that you asked Umut that she didn't get to answer. Do we have a role to kind of educate people, if you like, both here and in? I don't think, like, looking back at what we learned about all the isms and how one needs to deal with it, I don't think we have like a job to directly educate people. But I think the way we can be effective is the way that we live our lives within those identities that we carry, that within the identities that we are proud to live with. So if we live proud as an Afro Cypriot person, and we do everything sort of, like I said, I am an Afro Cypriot woman, and that's my, like, the foremost identities together. Then if I conduct myself in that manner, then I think that is how we can influence other people. And I think that's what happened within the Afro Cypriot group. Both me and you coming forward with this and being positive about, being visible. That was the very important thing, because that was what I said about being the most visible invisible group. So that invisibility disappearing first within ourselves, because I was reading what I wrote in my thesis today, and it actually said that invisibility actually existed amongst ourselves before it was existed within the general society. So I think what's happened with the Afro Cypriot group and what can happen with the people outside is that we are visible to ourselves. That visibility has grown more because of the group that we have. And because of that, I think more and more young people are interested, because it's hard for them to place themselves, especially the ones maybe in the diaspora, and to be able to put themselves, give themselves the identity and come forward with what they might experience and what they do, because it's kind of difficult. And it changed a bit in Cyprus now, that, like Yusuf saying, it's different in Turkey, it's different in Cyprus, and it's different in Australia. And what I found when I was in England, that you were welcome amongst other Black people, but maybe you were like kept outside of the Turkish-speaking community because they thought you were one of the other Black people. And they wouldn't, to me, like the shopkeepers who were Turkish shopkeepers talk to me in English, wouldn't talk to me in Turkish, and they'd be really surprised if I answer them back in Turkish. And they would also, even like last year or something, I go to a Turkish restaurant in London, and when I speak in Turkish, they don't understand because they don't expect me to say it in Turkish. And then if I carry on, then they ask, oh, where did you learn such good Turkish? It's like, it's this kind of thing. And I think consciously because of that kind of attitude, I was actually hiding that I could speak Turkish in the beginning when I was in London. And I think that's true for a lot of young people. Because of the circles that they can get accepted, they might hide that they're actually Afro Cypriots, and they could be seen like any other Black person in London, for example. But now, because of this group, and because of having more knowledge that there are others of us, and there are those of us who are proud, who are achieving things, and who are doing work on this, they are coming forward and they're wanting to learn.
Yeah. Thanks, Serap. Umut,
And one more thing, sorry. One more thing, I think, sorry, I'm just thinking about the younger Sittiga. I think what it is that young people also want to understand the experience of their parents, especially those ones in London who emigrated from here and went there. And now they can see that it's a different kind of time, but they want to understand and maybe communicate better with their parents. And that's another reason I think that's they're warming up to the group. And that's, I think, another achievement that we managed to gain those people and allow those relationships to take place.
So talking about I think this is the young Sittiga. She wrote a comment saying, I find some of the elder Afro Cypriots don't always acknowledge their African heritage. They just refer to themselves as Turkish Cypriots. I've always been proud of my heritage, but it's not something, it's not something I feel my family have ever been proud of, and I don't know why.
No, this is the older Sittiga.
Oh, this is the older Sittiga. Sittiga Recep is you are.
Yeah, Sittiga Recep is the
I know.
one, yeah.
Okay, so she's not that much older than other Sittiga.
No, she's a bit older.
Anyway, so Umut, you were cut off. You were making a point about the racism issue in Cyprus. We've got, we'll extend it by about until 8:30. I'm sorry about people waiting in the backstage. I'm sorry about that, but you'll have a chance to come back and we'll extend your time as well. Yeah, go on, Umut. Umut? I think you are...
Mike is...
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying not only that we are not connected.
Talk about connection. All right. Yusuf,
go on again.
Do you want to add anything to what Serap has said in terms of the achievements as well? I mean, what do you feel our achievement as Afro Cypriots have been to the racism issue, or instilling pride in young people especially?
Well, I mean, I think it all starts from the family. I mean, I've got a son who was born and still lives in Australia, and it starts within the family. It's true that the older generation don't talk about their heritage much, which we started to talk about our heritage, and we pass it through the younger generation.
Yeah,
and it's a better understanding now and a better achievement that we are having now. My son, as I said, born and raised and still living in Australia, and he had the opportunity to meet her grandfather, who was Black, and he's always proud of his Black heritage as well. So that gives a sort of a proudness into his heritage, and he's very open and not ashamed or anything about his Black heritage, which in Australia the blackness has achieved a lot. I mean, when I first went there in 1981, there were more racism than today. So, and the government later on, before I migrated back to Cyprus in 2010, in late 2000, about 2008, I think it was acknowledged and by the white Australians in there widely. And in fact, the Prime Minister has apologized to the Aborigines in there, what they've done to them for the stolen generation and everything. So it's becoming more and more stronger in Australia to understand each other and less racism. Well, I mean, if you think of the multicultural society of Australia, there is racism from different countries as well. But the racists are becoming a minority in Australia because there are more and more migrants in there. So it's not like England or it's not like US. It's less racism in Australia, but of course still exists. But in Cyprus, as you mentioned before, the group that you started with Serap, Afro Cypriot group, has given a boost to younger people to be proud of their cultural and race heritage as well. But in Cyprus now, I don't. I mean, maybe it was more racism than now. In early days, when our fathers and their families are living, that's
Of course,
probably why that they didn't talk about their heritage more.
Yes, of course, in Cyprus, with the population of African students, this racism thing has again sort of shown itself, hasn't it? So we won't go into that, unfortunately.
That's right. Yes,
but
yes. Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. But what I'd like to finish off with is to ask Serap about, in terms of developing contact with other BAME communities. I mean, I don't like this terminology, but black and minority ethnic communities. How can we collaborate? I mean, there is a lot of interest, isn't there? If you look at the group, a lot of people are from different black communities, our membership. We have quite a few. So what can we do in terms of developing our contacts with them, in terms of furthering our aims and objectives, Serap?
Well, I think what it is that there are people there, and that meeting we had back 2 years ago now, I think it was, again, part of this Black History Month in London, that because people don't know that there are Afro Cypriots, basically, or African heritage people living in Cyprus or coming from Cyprus to live in England. And people are very interested, especially within the last years, that the racism has become a big issue again, and also racial awareness has become a big issue again. It's about making alliances across the board, all over the world, if you like. And it's not so much the same in Cyprus, but it's more so in England, that you have these kind of different community groups, different social groups from different communities that they like to connect and have us on their side, if you like. So what we can do is carry on being aware, carry on developing within ourselves, carry on working within our own community, doing things that gives that sense of collective community sense to the Afro Cypriots in diaspora, as well as the ones in Cyprus. Then I think with that, we'll have a stronger hand to send maybe representation to the events, or to go and talk at their meetings, and to allow people to know more about the history of Cypriots that includes Afro Cypriots, and also our experiences, to let people know our experiences, which might be similar in some ways, which might then differ in some other ways because of not having suffered the same kind of racism like in the US, or in the, the institutional racism is not so much. But it is different now because of we are visible in one sense because of our own visibility, noticing our own visibility, and in a way forcing other people to notice us as Afro Cypriots now, especially that there are few of us as prominent individuals. I say that in quotation marks. But at the same time, we kind of maybe blend in because now there are lots of Africans here, African students, but they're not remaining as students. There are actually a lot of African workers here now.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
this is an issue that maybe you would need to talk with Umut, but maybe another debate.
Sure. Thanks, Serap. Umut, you are back with
Can
us.
I try one more time quickly? Yeah, I'm sorry about this, but the quick thing about the students.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Also, Umut, when you are talking about it, can you wrap up in the next couple of minutes talking about the academia? How can academia help us to further our research into our background? If you can touch on that as well. You got 2-3 minutes.
And two things about this, Dan. Right. So quickly, looking at the students and the racism issue that you mentioned at the beginning, I did actually learn a lot of things about my larger community, right, of Turkish Cypriots. And I have seen some figures, academics, openly making racist remarks, and it actually got me thinking the level of exclusions, how much of that is actually have a lot of racism underneath that we have not realized before. So there are a lot of things that we actually learn with the existence of students, and we should be appreciative of their being in Cyprus and learning and understanding our community's reaction to Black identities. Right? So in that sense, it's actually a very important moment for us. And that's one of the ways that academia needs to be actually looking into racism issues. It is done very superficially, not very deeply, not very systematically, unfortunately, there. So it needs to be much more systematically investigated from the perspectives of the people as well, without being judgmental first. I mean, we are all talking about it, but we do really need to understand the sources of racism there. As it has been mentioned, every society have their different pulls and reasons for being racist and the ways that racism actually sort of functions. So we do really need to understand the larger community as well. But more importantly, I think for our own consciousness and awareness raising about our identities, we do really need to systematically talk to people. There are some studies that I see about Afro Cypriots in Cyprus, but mostly coming from the dominant part of the society. They're talking about us, their view about us, and how they actually sort of see us. I'm not objecting such studies, but I am in a way, because I think we ourselves need to be figureheads on research like that, starting with very, very old people, because fastly we are losing a lot of information, a lot of history. We need to pay a lot of attention to oral histories, starting from the oldest populations to coming down towards the younger generations, to at least catch on how it was for them. What do they remember about their backgrounds and histories, right? What stories were told to them? Because stories are very precious. So if we can actually collect those kinds of narratives, we would actually leave a lot of precious information that Serap has been doing. A lot of the first stages of it, right? So then we do really need to do a lot of collection of stories, and different generations are going to produce different kinds of identity positions and awarenesses for us. In that sense, I think we do really need a lot more focus on it.
Okay, thanks very much indeed,
Yeah.
everyone. Serap, Umut, Yusuf, thanks very much indeed. I don't want to keep the other colleagues waiting too long.
One last thing that I want to... Right.
Yeah, go on,
okay.
Yusuf. Very quickly, though.
For the last quote, I mean, we do appreciate the work that you've done together forming that group Afro Cypriots with Serap. But you mentioned, Serap has mentioned that you met 2 years ago in London.
Yeah.
But we're talking about Afro Cypriots, and we should meet in Cyprus actually after this pandemic.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes.
We should organize a large occasion that all the Afro Cypriots meet in Cyprus, where they originated from. Yeah.
Yes, that will be great. I'd love to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks
Developing
very much
the...
indeed. Thanks a lot.
Not in London. We are
Not in London, no.
Afro Cypriots in Cyprus.
In Cyprus, that's true. Thanks very much indeed.
We have a plan. I just add to that. Ertanç and I have a plan for many years now that bring a photo with a story to have a meeting in Cyprus, but we haven't actually managed to do that yet. But we have a plan.
We will.
That's right.
We will do it.
Well, let's do it. I'm for
it. Thank you, Ertanç.
Thank you, three. What we are going to do now is to show, watch it in the backstage. We are going to show some pictures of Afro Cypriots, pictures I've taken from the Afro Cypriot Facebook group. So enjoy, and then we'll have the three other colleagues back. Thanks a lot again.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gülay, for putting this together. Yes, dear friends, we are in the second part of the program. In the first half, we spoke to esteemed colleagues, Umut Özkaleli, Yusuf Nidai, and Serap Kanay. Now, my three other guests in the second part of the program are Meral Ece, Anthony Chrysostomou, and Florenza Incirli. Hi, hello there. I'm really sorry I kept you waiting a little bit longer than we intended. I hope you watched the program. We watched the first part. Yeah? Thanks. So we'll do the same as we did for the first part. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself briefly and say in the multiplicity of your identities, how high is the Black identity? How important is that to you as Afro Cypriots? Shall we start from Meral? If you, yeah.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much, and greetings to everyone watching. Very interesting program so far. I've really enjoyed listening to it, and thank you for organising this. This whole subject is interesting because there's so little research on it. There's so little information, and I think what we've tried to do, in recent years, our generation, if you like, is to shine a light on our heritage, on our cultural heritage. I think some of the things I heard from previous speakers is our parents' and grandparents' generation were perhaps reluctant to talk about the whole issue of race and where they came from because of their identity growing up in Cyprus. I mean, you asked me what what's important to me is my identity. My identity, I see myself as a Cypriot. I'm Turkish Cypriot. I'm a woman. But I do more and more as I get older, I'm more and more aware of my cultural heritage, and have been interested in researching where I've come from and looking into my family background as well. And it's very hard because there's nothing really much written down. There's no we can't find much in records, like this program we have in this country, Who Do You Think You Are, where they trace people back to the 1700s. Well, it's hard for us to do that. So some years ago, I did a sort of ancestry DNA, which looks at the DNA, and that was quite interesting. It came back that majority of my heritage is sort of Middle East, Anatolian, but African, a lot of African, a little bit of European, and the only bit of European is about 14% Italian. And I trace that back to the Venetian times, pre-Ottoman. And I think that's from my father's side, because my Afro Cypriot heritage is from my mother's side. And the photographs you've just shown, I've just seen 2 photographs of my aunt, my mum's sister, and I've seen some relatives there, which was nice to see. But on my father's side, it's people are, they're much fairer, and I think I'd probably take after that side. They've got blue or green eyes, much fairer. My mother's side were very, very dark. And I think when I first went to Cyprus, I was born in London. So when I went to Cyprus first time, I was about 9 or 10. And when I went to the village, my mother's from Alaminyor, my father's from Vuda. So we went to Alaminyor and Ios Theodorus. And of course, all my mother's family were very dark. And I was really shocked. I remember being quite shocked at that because I hadn't seen many of my family in this country, in London. And I was sort of asking, began asking questions there to my mother. Who are these people? How are we related to all these people? They're all black, esmer. And it was like, shush, don't talk about it. It wasn't a subject to be talked about very much. Yeah. So, but over the years, I think I've got more and more interested, and obviously discovered through oral history, because that's what we have passed down through my mother, that her grandfather, my great-grandfather, was from Sudan. And I've actually been back to Sudan. I've had the privilege of being invited to go to Sudan. and it was fantastic. It was amazing to go there and see so many people who just I could identify. They looked like my family.
Yeah.
You know, the men and women, a very distinctive look about them, and made very welcome. And I remember the University of Khartoum was quite keen to try to do some research to try and find out, you know, how we came to be there. They were very interested and treated me as sort of a returning sister. You know, and it was a great privilege to have gone there. And I'm still in touch with Sudanese, some elements of the Sudanese community here through the embassies, which are, you know, which is great. So that's where I'm coming from. I think as I've got older, I've tried to find out more and more with my, you know, history, my social, my cultural history, because I think I do identify a lot. I think I am part. We all are. We are what, you know, what's gone on before. Our identity and how we feel about ourselves has to be our ancestry. I think that as I get older, you see your traits in yourself that you saw in your, you know, your parents, and then you see in your children. I think we are that, you know, it runs through the generations. So I think it's very important to hold on to it and not let
Absolutely.
go. And, you know, as I said about identity being important, I think the thing is in Cyprus as well, it's such a small country. We've never been, if you look at the history of Cyprus, we've always been part of another empire, somebody else's empire. We've never, you know, been in a position, I think, where we've had the confidence, I think, as Cypriots to hold up what our history and our culture and identity is. I think we've always been, you know, reluctant to do that because of, you know, our history, you know, under, you know, Ottoman and Venetian and, you know, British rule particularly, and part of the British Empire. And if you look at all the other countries in the British Empire, ethnicities and heritage was very much suppressed. You know, you had to become part of you were British, that was it. You know, you had to integrate, you had to assimilate, and, you know, you were part of the empire. And I think certainly in this country now, in the UK, we're seeing a lot now with this whole Black Lives Matters debate that's going on, very important debate that's going on now, and the debate around teaching more in schools about British colonial history. You'd be forgiven for thinking that, you know, we talk we probably know more about Henry VIII's wives than we do about British colonial history.
Yes.
And how black people came to be in this country and in other countries, you know. So certainly there's a huge movement now to raise awareness, do more research, and talk about these things openly, as are in other countries. I think other countries have done it better. You know, New Zealand and Canada have done it better than we have. But I think
Meral,
sorry, I'm going on a bit, but I think
no,
that's some of the
that's
issues.
fine. We'll come back to those issues
Sure.
in a bit later. But let me go to the other guests and ask them. I mean, Anthony, it's really great to see you because we've done a few of these programs. We've had special events, but we've never come across with Afro Cypriot from the Greek Cypriot community. So tell us about your background, Anthony. What kind of issues you as a Greek Cypriot, Greek Afro Cypriot have faced? Talk about it. It's really exciting to finally come across an Afro Cypriot from the Greek Cypriot.
Thank you for having me on your show, firstly.
You're welcome. Yeah, let us know about your issues, your history.
In Cyprus, it's not really had a negative impact. I suppose I was born and raised in London, South London.
Right.
And in London, there is quite a bit of racism, and I encountered quite a bit, to be honest. But I always associated myself as being a Greek Cypriot, I suppose, because of the racism. So not because of anything else other than, you know, I had all this racism sort of part of something. So being Cypriot made me feel part of something. If that makes sense. In Cyprus, I didn't feel any racism, even though on my mother's side they are black. Well, half of them are. My grandmother's blonde hair, blue eyes, but my granddad was black. But I didn't feel that there was any racism in Cyprus per se. So from a Cypriot perspective, it was great. From England, not so good, to be honest. Your previous talker that was talking about Australia, funny enough, I lived there for a couple of years.
Okay.
I found Australia to be quite racist as well. So, you know, I guess it just depends how you feel, how sensitive. And I suppose I'm perhaps a little bit sensitive about how it perceives you. So, because I'm a bit dark-skinned, even in England, so I've got a Cockney accent, if you like, I was never ever thought of as English. So, you know, irrespective of my accent or whatever. So that's kind of it, really, I guess. I don't know if that's oversimplifying it.
No. I mean, we Turkish
It's how you
Cypriots.
feel. I don't really feel that
Turkish
it should matter
Cypriots-
what colour you are, to be
Sure.
honest, but it does to some extent.
Sure. Turkish Cypriots from African heritage has been obviously completely assimilated into the Turkish Cypriot culture. I suppose the same goes for Greek Cypriots. You've been assimilated into the Greek Cypriot culture. And although what you are saying there is no problem in Cyprus, but I mean, most people I know, our experience has been that, okay, there hasn't been institutionalized racism that we faced, but there has been racism and discrimination on social level. Is that the same issue for you? Was that the same issue for you as Greek Cypriot, as a Greek Cypriot from African heritage?
Not whilst so in Cyprus, it's been quite positive. I was received, you know, quite warmly in Cyprus. They'd say, "Oh, are you a Guinea?" Because that was the surname, or that is the surname of my mum's side of the family. And because I'm sort of tall and dark-skinned, they associated me as being a Guinea.
What does that mean?
And they were quite well known in the Famagusta district because my uncle was a runner.
Yeah, what does it mean?
That's the actually translated. I believe it means Chinese.
Really? That's strange. Yeah.
That's it. It's my uncle who held the record in Cyprus for the 800 meters. At the time, in that era, I believe, there was a Chinese man that was a fast runner, and they said, "Oh, he runs like the Chinaman." So they said Guinea.
That's how it originates from.
No.
Okay.
So yeah, but it's been all. But regarding your the lady that spoke, see the name, but it's the lady that first spoke just now, and she said about the DNA. My
Yes,
sister
Meral.
done a DNA check, and on our thing we've got 49.5 South Italian. Yes,
Really?
Meryl. Sorry, apologies. I can't read because the writing's very small.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's 49.5% Greek and South Italian, 22.7 Middle Eastern, 12.1 West Asian, and 6% Macy. I've got North African, Italian, a mixed bag, really.
Okay.
To be honest.
Yes. Quite a mixed bag. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Anthony. We'll come back to you all. I'll ask you general questions as well in a minute. Florenza, hi, how are you?
Hi, hello,
Yeah.
hi. I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, again, if you can tell us about how important is your African heritage to you, how high does it come in terms of your multiplicity of identities? I know you've done a lot of work on identity as well.
I mean, yeah, I mean, first of all, obviously, I don't experience the world.
Yeah.
I'm not visibly black. I'm not black. I acknowledge and I cherish and honor the parts of my heritage that are Afro Cypriot. I know from my mum's side that my mum has Afro Cypriot heritage, and it was something that was brought up very early on because obviously my mum is quite darker skin, so it was a discussion we always had within the home, and my parents were always very open about it, and I was very privileged in that I grew up in a very progressive home where we talked about our heritage. So I think I've never done a DNA test, but I know that my name, my first name, is Florenza because of our Venetian heritage. I know that because of my dad's village, and I know that there's a myth, and it's probably true that my mum's maiden name Karaz is because her great grandfather or her grandfather was also a black man, and these are the myths that we sort of construct around us. And my current research interests and the communities I'm around and the people that I feel loved and loved by are all from various different communities. And I think being a Cypriot, I'm very, very proud to be a Cypriot, and I'm very, very proud to be from my village and from my home. And I think unpacking all of our histories can bring us closer to being a unified community, whether that is as Turkish Cypriots or as Cypriots as a whole. I think I want to say that when I encountered Serap's work, when I encountered Meral Ece here, and now hearing what Umut has said, like I'm very lucky to have this road paved before me in terms of the people are there for me to learn from, and my work is to be honoring them and their practices. I think I know I'm a little bit confused in this moment, but I've just been listening to everything that everyone has been saying, and I just feel very lucky to be a part of this conversation, especially as I obviously don't navigate the world I don't experience racism in my day-to-day life, and I just want to make sure that that's sort of stressed in this moment.
Yes, I mean, the question I asked the other colleagues, I'll ask you as well. People from the Caribbean always complain about the fact that not knowing their background, heritage, precise heritage, puts them at a disadvantage. I mean, that's a complaint we hear a lot from Caribbean community. People from Caribbean origin. Do you think we, as Afro Cypriots as well, have this type of disadvantage? And also, why has that not been? Why have we been so late into digging into our history? I mean, you mentioned Florenza. You've been really lucky because the issue of identity has been talked about openly in your family, within your family, but not all Afro Cypriots have been lucky in terms of the issue being talked about openly. So many people have suffered from that. So what do you think about that in terms of, is that a disadvantage for us not knowing our history, our heritage, precise heritage? How do you feel?
I think that we should borrow the methods and build an international solidarity with people across the world, whether they are of African heritage or otherwise, because in my current research and in my research practices, I have some amazing Caribbean philosophers who have done an extensive amount of work on these topics. And I think if we were to borrow those methods and be a lot more vocal about that process, about the similarities and the differences and how they place us in these islands, because ultimately we are from an island and there's a reason for this island to be as mixed as it is. And I think it's not so much a loss, but it's a lot we can gain. We are a beautiful community and a beautiful culture. And I think just borrowing those methods and listening to those who across the world have had similar experiences, we can find a way to navigate it now, especially because the loss of archives isn't something new. All former colonies have a lack of archives. We're very lucky in that we have oral testimonies and we have people around still in this moment. And I think even encountering the fact that, you know, the song, the Arapali song, that I've known that, and then to see, you know, the grandchild of that song and these legends, these myths in our world, and to have the mentorship that you and Serap have continually given out to so many people and constant engagement and mediating, I think it's not a loss. I think there's a lot to be gained. It's just making sure that it's done in the present moment.
Thanks, Florenza. What do you think, Meral? Has this been a disadvantage for us?
Well, I think the lack of research or written, you know, history. It's been oral history, which is valuable. But as I think, as Florenza and others said earlier, that, you know, as we lose the older generations, I just felt that with my mother. I lost my mother, as you know, 3 years ago, and she was almost the keeper, you know, of our family history, because she had a fantastic memory. And she knew everything, you know, the great-grandfather, all the names. So she was able to sort of give us, you know, my generation, a lot of information about, you know, who we are, where we came from, the names, you know, how many children they had, what they did, what occupation, going back a long time. So when you lose somebody, as we start losing the older generation, it's like you're losing sections of our library, sections of our research are going. So we need to sort of try and collate as much as we can from the older generation. I know probably now, I wish when I was younger I'd had more conversations with my grandmother, but it, you know, when I was younger it didn't seem it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't a thing. You mentioned to me earlier to speak. I mean, people will know, I'm in the House of Lords. I'm a member of the House of Lords. And 10 years ago when I was introduced, one of the things they ask you to do in your maiden speech is to talk about yourself, because you're introducing yourself to the House and who you are. They don't know who you are, most of them. I thought it was important to talk about my heritage. So I talked about my parents coming here as immigrants from Cyprus and what they did and all the rest of it. But I said also, I have another dimension in my history. And I talked about that. And a lot of people were really shocked. You know, I had so many people coming up to me, and then there was a feature of it in the Sunday Times because everyone thought it was so amazing. And the link to, obviously, Tracy, I mean, and all the rest of it came out as well. But I just thought it was really important to talk about that because, you know, it goes down in Hansard. It's recorded for future people that want to talk about, you know, want to look into it. But I just remember afterwards, you know, my mother called me up and she said, "Why did you have to talk about that?" And I said, "Well, it was, you're not in a bad way." She said, "Did you think it?" And she said, "Well, I had some the next day it was in the newspapers, and she had some phone calls from her cousins, some cousins, complaining about it. They thought it was inappropriate that I talked about this. It wasn't, you know, painting our family in a very good light." And I said, "Look, that's who we are. You know," I said, "I'm not ashamed, and neither are you." She said, "No, of course I'm not ashamed." And I said, but she was sort of relaying to me what was being said in Cyprus. Now, this is 10 years ago. She said, "Well, you know, people weren't happy. You know, the Turkish name for, you know, slave is köle, which is quite derogatory." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry about that they feel that way, but you can't be in denial as to who you are, your identity. It's what we are. We should be proud of our heritage." I said, "I sit and listen to, you know, hereditary peers whose family go back hundreds of years, who are given, you know, peerages from various kings and queens in the last sort of hundreds of years, and they're very proud of their history. Why shouldn't I be proud of my history and where I've come from? I'm not going to hide that." And my mother was very good. She understood that. She said, "No, of course, oh no, I agree with you." She understood that. But I think, you know, it's this thing about social pressure, you know, when people complain about it. So that's our problem has been. So the more information we can get and collate. I mean, I read recently that, you know, there's evidence of in Cyprus in the Bronze Age that there were Black Cypriots, because they're depicted in Cypriot art.
Yeah.
And if you see where the proximity of where Cyprus is, how close it is to Egypt and Africa, I mean, it's very, very close to these countries.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yes.
there's been,
Yes.
you know, immigration or people arriving in various ways from, you know, from Africa mainly and other parts of the world. It's such a melting pot. And I just think, as
Absolutely.
Anthony was talking about his heritage, his Italian heritage as well, I was really pleased and surprised and thought it was really nice to have a bit of, you know, southern Italian. I didn't say it there actually, but I quite like the idea of being Venetian. I've always felt a connection with Italians as well. So I was very proud of that. And I think it's really something that we should be promoting as well. And I think the Afro Cypriot Facebook page has thrown up, those photographs you showed were fantastic. I mean, in themselves, they're all a story, aren't they? They're a sort of pictorial history of families, of their lives and their descendants. And I think it's something that we should celebrate and embrace.
Yes, what you mentioned about, I remember quite well when you made your maiden speech in the House of Lords. It caused a lot of disappointment among our own Turkish Cypriot community. They were disappointed that you didn't stress the Turkish Cypriots, that you brought into the mix of your African heritage as well. So people were quite disappointed in the community. But yeah, I mean, that's the question I wanted to ask. How could we get rid of this?
Can't please everyone.
Unwillingness of the Afro Cypriots as well? I mean, you mentioned that some of our own Afro Cypriot people, you know, do not accept that they are different. Do you remember, Florenza, when we had the event at the, well, you were there, Meral, as well, when we had the event at the TCCA, a couple of sisters, Afro Cypriot sisters, were violently opposing the notion that our ancestors might have been slaves. I mean, they were so violently opposing it.
Absolutely.
So there is a lot of unwillingness as well.
It's a stigma. There's a stigma attached to this, isn't
absolutely,
it? Really.
Absolutely.
You know, it's seen as being, it's almost like a caste system, isn't it? That somehow they're lesser people and people don't want to be, some sections of the community don't want to be associated with that sort of history.
Yes, that's right.
Which,
that's right.
you know, which I think will change in time.
Yeah. You mentioned about the effect of the Afro Cypriot group has been quite positive. We'll talk about it in a few minutes, but I want to ask Anthony about if there is unwillingness to accept one's origin, Afro Cypriots from the Greek Cypriot side. Is there an unwillingness of you from your relatives, people you know who are from who have African heritage? Is there any unwillingness to accept that they are from the African heritage? Do they talk about it? Has there been any research done in the Greek Cypriot community about Afro Cypriots? I think we've got a slight delay. Anthony, can you hear me?
Sorry, you're talking to me now. Apologies.
Yeah. Yes, I was.
Sorry, apologies.
That's fine. That's fine. I was asking if there has been an unwillingness on the part of the Greek Cypriots.
No, so
yeah, I think you are freezing.
I was given very limited information regarding my ancestors, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go on.
Hello?
Yeah, I can, Anthony.
I was just saying that basically I was given very limited information. I was told originally that my grandfather's was from Egypt. We found out many years later that it was probably Ethiopia. So there's a similarity in terms of the first two letters, perhaps, or whatever. But
Yeah.
so supposedly he came over on a boat with his sister. So there was two of them. And that's very much the only information we've got, actually. Nations are dying, you know, because it's proving to be somewhat difficult, to be honest. Cypriot heritage. So that's proven to be very difficult. But yeah, that's it really. But positive on the Cypriot side in terms of how the my blackness has been received over here in Cyprus.
Yes, it's unfortunate that we haven't really we haven't caught the whole of what you said, but you keep breaking. So is it possible, Anthony, to leave and then reconnect? It might correct the problem. Can you leave and then come back again? Reconnect. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Again, Meral and Florenza, we have a lot of people, a lot of Afro Cypriots who claim that they have not encountered any racism. I mean, it's not just relevant to Afro Cypriots. I mean, some people from the Black and minority ethnic community too, they claim that they haven't encountered any racism. Obviously, this shows a lot of unawareness of what racism is, what the manifestation of racism. So what do we say to Afro Cypriots who claim that they haven't had any racism in Cyprus or among the Cypriot diaspora in this country?
I mean, I'm happy to answer in this moment, but I think what's clear in the Turkish Cypriot community is there is an intentional ignorance surrounding racism, sexism, homophobia. We've had this discussion before, and it's almost as though certain things are postponed after. I'm echoing what was said earlier, but postponed until the conflict is solved. But another issue within our community is also this desire to stay insular. There's certain separate parts of our community. There's a desire to be insular. So when I was younger, and to this day, my parents are very happy with whoever I marry, whenever I marry, if I marry. And however, all of my friends when I was in school in North London, who are of Turkish Cypriot heritage, their parents were very strict about that. You must be with another Turkish Cypriot person. And, you know, at worst, a Turkish person. And that was sort of like the conversation that surrounded. And I think this is a very small part of it. But then when we talk about the experiences of assimilation and the fear of assimilation of the Turkish Cypriot community, I heard this a lot when I was working at the TCCA. There's a fear of assimilation, but at the same time, there's a lack of solidarity with other people of color within London, and a lack of vocal solidarity. So when I did a lot of my research, the only people who ever came up when I Googled them was of course Meral Ece, and encountering those articles was genuinely so exciting because it was someone who was so vocal. And then on top of that, of course, Serap, who I'm very lucky to have a relationship with now, and to know how much she wants to share this information. She's very intentional about that. So I think our issue is an intentional pushing away of any conversation outside of just the Cyprus issue, and we will never be a whole community if we continue that.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the fact that it's really important to link with the other communities wherever they are. So we haven't done that, have we? I mean, as Cypriot communities, Turkish Cypriots, Afro Cypriots, we haven't really successfully linked with other communities. We've been very insular as a community, and it's really a struggle to change that. It's been a struggle to actually, if you look at our community organizations as well, the way they work and so on, and it wasn't, if it wasn't for us, the Afro Cypriot group, none of the existing organizations would have picked this issue up, I feel. So I don't know if you agree with that, Meral and Florenza.
I mean, I do. No, you go, sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, Ertanç and I go way back, I think, to a long time when we tried to do this sort of thing, when we worked in sort of race and equality work many years ago. And there was, I think, more of a willingness for people to, you know, from Black minority ethnic communities to engage and work together. But I think that's not, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know if I'm out of touch with this, but I just do feel that that's kind of not gone anywhere particularly. It hasn't developed in a way that we assumed it would. I think it works better in sort of trade union circles, certainly with communities working together under the umbrella of Black sections. I think the issue also for us as a community is that we don't have a clear definition in this country when it comes to you know, identity. It's sort of other, ethnic other.
Yes.
You know, which really is irritating. I know we had a project years ago to try and get Cypriots and Turkish and Greek Cypriots recognised in the census, to have a proper, you know, head count of how many of us there were and what our needs and, you know, what our issues were. But it's fallen rather on deaf ears. I think that's a problem as well. So people think, oh, we've heard of Cyprus. Oh, yes, we know about that. Oh, we know there's some problems. They know so little. I think it's very, very, very difficult to develop that into, you know, our heritage. And certainly on heritage, if you talk to people about, you know, Afro Cypriots, most people won't know what you're talking about. It's just not. It's just not an issue. It never comes up. So I think we have got, you know, we can't rely on other people. It's always saying wait for someone else to do it. I think those of us who've got an interest in this have got a responsibility to highlight, develop, and, you know, to work on different projects and I was delighted to hear Florenza's doing a lot of research and in academia. I think that's fantastic. You know, we need more of that, more people like yourself, Florenza, to really take an interest and develop it. You asked me about racism. It's very interesting because obviously I'm not Black, I'm not dark. But my brother was, and I don't know if Ertanç remembers him. He died a long time ago when he was quite young.
I haven't met him, I don't think, no.
Well, he was very young when he died, sadly. He was 30, but he was very dark. We were very different. And, you know, he had black hair. He looked very mixed race, you know, dark skin. And it was in the days of stop and search. So he used to say to me, you know, he was always being stopped by the police for all various things, sometimes things he wasn't meant to be doing. But he always said to me, "Oh, it's all right for you. You're not Black. You don't get stopped by the police. You don't get the racism that I get." You know, when he wanted to, you know, certain things. I'm talking about he's been dead nearly 30 years, so it's a long time ago. But you know, when there was overt racism in London, in the UK, I mean, he really experienced it in a way that I never did. And he always talked about it, you know, and obviously how it affected him as a young man. Being a Turkish Cypriot and dark, you know, mixed race, he was, you know, subjected to a lot of racism, particularly by the police. So I think in that way, I've been fortunate that I haven't experienced it in that way. I've experienced other, you know, sexism, misogyny, you know, racism about when people see who I am, my name, they think, oh, you know, I mean, I've experienced that. We've all had a low level of that sort of thing. But not in the overt way that maybe you have, Ertanç, as well. I think the first time Ertanç and I met, we looked at each other. Do you remember the very first time we met?
Yeah, I do, indeed.
We met, God knows how many years ago now. Give our ages away here. And Ertanç said to me, "You look about as Turkish Cypriot as I do."
Yes,
I'll never forget that. And that was it. So
you know my wife Ayla, don't you? So
yes.
I say the same about her and me.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So we're interesting. Let's put it that way. We have an interesting hinterland.
Yeah, Florenza, you were saying you wanted to comment about the same issue.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I feel very lucky. I just also wanted to add that to anyone who's watching and who may be in academia or outside of it doing their own research, to please contact me. And I really love to talk and to share knowledge, share resources. I have an entire drive of as many academic articles as possible, and I'm really happy to share them and to just connect with other young Cypriots as well who want to be involved, because I think that's really important as well, to be able to continue this conversation. I don't want to be the only, young person as a representative, especially because I'm so early on in my academic career, and I do want to dedicate my life to this. So I'm very happy to continue this practice outside of these appearances when I'm speaking with you, Ertanç.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, when you and I talked about this identity research, we had a lot of plans before this blasted COVID interfered. So
Yeah,
we'll do something in the future, definitely.
I would
But
really love that.
it's a pleasure to have young people like you who have been so interested in the issue of identity, and specifically Afro Cypriot identity. So you are our hope, Florenza. You
That's a lot of pressure.
No pressure.
no pressure. Now we'll be helping you in the background. You'll take the lead, and we'll follow for a change.
If ever, I've always said it. If I can ever, help people like yourself, offer my support, I do feel, I'm in a privileged position. I'm the only sort of, Turkish Cypriot in Parliament, really, and certainly in the Lords, and I have access to resources. Well, I'm not so much now because I'm all remote. I haven't been going in physically, but I feel very strongly that I can help and support other Turkish Cypriots who want to do this, engage in this work and do more, and put them in touch with anyone, certainly with people in Sudan. Things have changed in Sudan, actually. It's going to be, hopefully, with this new revolution that took place recently.
Oh, yeah.
I feel we've, one thing I did, if I just say this on Sudan, because I think a lot of us did, have originated from Sudan or Egypt.
That's
or,
right, yeah.
I think because of Sudan's history, I felt this was very interesting. They were also part of the British Empire, and they've had a very checkered and unhappy and violent sort of history since independence in 1958 from the British, various coups and all the rest of it. And you've probably seen in the last year that there was a people's revolution. They overthrew the dictator Bashir. And the country's in a state of flux and turmoil still. But, they are very keen to engage with us, with the British, and our outside world, really, because they've been, they've been cut off. They've had sanctions against them from America, who are just now talking about lifting the sanctions. If the Sudanese pay the Americans $350 million and recognise Israel, this is all very complicated, which I won't go into now, but they are very keen as a people, and they're amazing people, and I do identify with them in the way they are so warm, hospitable, they embrace you in a way that you don't perhaps feel from other, other societies. Certainly, I don't know if I've always felt that with the British, with English people or British people, but I did feel so welcome and at home, and it was an incredible experience. If anyone ever gets an opportunity, and I just travel in the future, I'm looking at Florenza, who's still young, and hopefully there will be a post-COVID world at some point. If you ever get an opportunity to go, you must go. It is, it is a fantastic country, steeped in history, and I think that part of our history is missing, isn't it?
Yes,
about
absolutely.
How that first generation, when they arrived, however they arrived in Cyprus, what they went through, what they experienced, it's missing. It's a missing link, isn't it? Because it was so long ago.
Absolutely.
You're talking about the 19th century, really.
Yeah, definitely.
So if we can find out any information and start putting it together, maybe posting some articles on the Facebook page as well.
Yeah,
I think
I will.
I would find that helpful as well, if there's anything that we can share, experiences or oral history because we can start connecting, and DNA as
Yeah.
well. I think our ancestry DNA is going to be quite important.
That's quite important.
I wanted to
Go
just
on.
add to Meryl's point, just in terms of recently, I think it was, I can't remember the Turkish name for it, but it was the Prophet Muhammad's birthday. And I remember telling my other Muslim friends, oh, when I was younger, my mum, my nana used to tell me, you know, make a wish on that night and it will come true. And then I was talking to my other friends and they said, oh, that's a Sufi practice. And considering Sufi practices in Sudan and all over East Africa, I think finding those connections in our way of practicing, whether it is our cultural practices or other sort of threads that are tied and connected, I think it's really beautiful. And I'm really happy that you brought up Sudan because, yeah, it's very true.
Yeah, I think what we can do as part of the Afro Cypriot group is to have a kind of think tank in terms of carrying forward these type of ideas, how we can link with other countries, Sudan, for example, Egypt, and so on, and do some sort of, and also academia. I asked Umut about what the role of academia should have in helping us to sort of investigate our backgrounds. So academia is really important, and there has been interest. If you look at our Facebook group, we have quite a lot of people from different Black communities. There is a lot of interest. It's a matter of us utilizing this interest and find out a lot more about it. There is a comment here I'd like to read to you. I've always been neglecting reading comments because I'm not very good at multitasking, unfortunately. So there is this comment. Now I've lost it. Sorry, I'll basically someone is saying if Florenza and Meral didn't mention their African heritage, I wouldn't have thought they had any. Yeah, that's it. As I look at Florenza and Meral, I would never have thought they would have any Black heritage till they mentioned it. And Serpil has been writing. She's written. If Gülay can put Serpil's comment, the last comment. Yes, I would like to get in contact with Florenza. We'll put you in touch, Florenza, because if you can put the previous comment, Gülay, Serpil, yeah. I have, as a Turkish Cypriot, tried to conduct research into the lives of Turkish Cypriots as part of my PhD degree, but it was not well received. And as a result of this, I felt like I did not have the right backing and support to complete this research. After the late Tözünisa passed away, he supported me a lot when he was still with us. Yeah, it's really unfortunate that young people like Serpil has had to give up her research. And by all means, Florenza, if you could contact her and have a chat, have a discussion, and let's think how we can forward this idea of having a think tank discussing these issues and so on. I think Facebook group has been fantastic. And well, let me ask you, Florenza, as a young person, sorry, I keep bringing the fact that you are a young person. What difference has that group done to you in terms of, you explain, what difference has it done for you?
I think for me I think it was so important in terms of my mum. That was my biggest priority, is that my mum's experience was always very difficult in England, and she's an amazing person. And I think finding that group and then telling her about it, and then her seeing other people of similar experiences or backgrounds, and then realizing that my own heritage is so mixed and so exciting and so diverse in that way it is. I think finding that group was a way to find a community within a community within a community, and that's something that I really love to do, is that I know that in this moment in London, I'm surrounded by my community. They may not be Turkish Cypriot, but I know they're all watching in this moment. And finding that group was very similar, finding Serap's work, finding these articles, this process of uncovering and then connecting. I'm really excited to talk to Serpil. This process of uncovering and then finding community has been really, really amazing. And I think I always felt a little bit odd when I was living in Cyprus. I always felt as if I was a bit too vocal. But now finding other Turkish Cypriots who I can see as inspirations and role models and then continue that work. I want to be dedicated to that practice. That has been amazing and inspiring. So thank you so much, Ertanç Hidayettin. Like, you really have been an amazing person. So I just want to say that as well. And of course, Serap.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Unfortunately, Anthony has had some problems and he had to leave. So really thanks Anthony for joining us, even though the experience has not been it must have been very frustrating for you, because nevertheless we had quite a lot of insight from you in terms of the Afro Cypriot background within the Greek Cypriot community. So by all means, we'll meet again. We'll try to, hopefully the internet in Cyprus will be much better. We've had problems previously with Umut and other people as well because of the internet. So unfortunately, we are living in very challenging times, and I would have liked to be in the studio doing this program, but it's not to be. So if we can ask, I was just reading a message. If we can ask Gülay to put a couple of messages. She mentioned there has been some good messages, and then we will end the program. Okay, there is one from Andreas from Famagusta. Merhaba Ertanç, hepinize merhabalar. There appears to be very little awareness within the Greek Cypriot community or the Afro Cypriot community. Hopefully, your research can raise awareness within both communities and enrich our knowledge of amazing diversity of Cyprus. Many thanks, Andreas. Many thanks for your comment. Yeah, we've had quite a few comments, but it's really difficult to conduct the interview chat and sort of bring in the comments as well. So Gülay will be bringing more comments. So where do we go from here, friends? Well, we talked quite a lot of ideas, actually. But as I said, this was our contribution to the Black History Month. And we talked about achievements as well as our history and so on. So if I can ask you to say a few words as a means of closing the discussion. Meral, can we start with you?
Just what general comments you want?
Some general comments. How would you like this to continue to be furthered?
Well, I think this has been an important discussion and contribution to Black History Month, although it's the 1st of November, which is, we forgive you for. I know that's out of your control. So, thanks for organising this. I think it's important. And I think it's important that we continue with the online presence of the Afro Cypriot page. Hopefully, maybe develop it into a website. A good idea. In the future. I know talented people in the community who can develop a website, and it'd be good to have something interactive where we could post, historical, and we could actually put up research articles, data, start looking at numbers. Maybe I'd be quite interested, because so many people from across Cyprus have got some, links, some genetic makeup. Interestingly, in my DNA, about I think you had Sitika Hussein earlier. I think we're fourth cousins. I think we found out on Facebook. Facebook, Ancestry DNA, and I've also you know, when I get to fourth and fifth cousins, a lot of Greek Cypriot names are coming through, which kind of makes sense because we're, you know, I think we'll all find that there's going to. I've heard this from others as well. I think you're going to find that there is a lot of shared DNA. We go back 3 or 4 generations. It's very, very similar.
Yeah.
Small island. But I think maybe look to develop. I'd be interested in seeing if we could develop outside Facebook as well, you know, a kind of website, interactive website, and try and get a bigger reach.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, across, because you know we've got people from. We've already had contacts from Australia and other places as well. But I'd be just interested in linking up, see if we can link up with other communities as well that we discussed, and look at where we've got our some sort of shared heritage and how we can work together and how other communities have taken that sort of thing forward as well. But I certainly think we should develop it. I know it's very restricting at the, you know, under this awful pandemic, but we can't do as much as we'd like to. But we, you know, we've got social media, we've got the internet. Your idea of a think tank, I think, is very good. I think that's a really interesting idea. And just more research. I mean, somebody mentioned to me that we can look up the old Ottoman files, apparently, if we can do it. I know someone, you know, Ismail Veli, he's done a lot of work on this.
Yeah, for Lurigena.
Yeah, but apparently it's they're very well kept. But I've not been able to access them myself because they're in Ottoman, you know, eski Türkçe, you know, the Arabic script. But you can get somebody to transcribe it for you. Just try and date back and find out, you know, if you've got the names of your grandparents, great-grandparents, you can actually start to find out a little bit more about them as well, how they arrived in Cyprus. I think we can try and access that information as well with more research. I think there's there's a real gap there.
I know Serap has come across with a lot of lack of data in the archives, I think in Cyprus at least. But perhaps in Turkey there might be a lot more. I don't know. So those are the kind of things we can explore, actually.
Definitely.
Okay, Florenza, can I take your last words and then we'll finish?
I think my last words will be we met 2 years ago in adulthood. Maybe I encountered in childhood, but in adulthood we met 2 years ago when I was working at the TCCA we organized the Black History Month event together, and to continue having this discussion now and to see it platformed more and more every year. There's more people, new names. I think this is a really amazing step, and I'm really happy to take part in all of these ideas and to contribute in all the ways that I can. I have, and over this next year, I'm completing my master's degree in visual anthropology and hoping to pursue further education. But again, I love to be in alternative educational environments. I love to work in community and with communities. So I'm really looking forward to just creative processes as well. We can make films, we can have current photographing. You know, we could photograph each and every member in this current moment and have those archives continue on. Because when we saw those images earlier, they were really beautiful and really moving. And to know that and to be visible in this way, like, thank you so much to allow me to be a part of this conversation, really.
Yeah, no, not only we are going to allow you to be part of it, you are going to lead it. I think those photographs, what I did in my amateur way, I just took the photos, sent them to Gülay, and she put them in but one of the ideas we've been discussing is to have a photography exhibition out of all those photos, beautiful photographs. Those are only about 50, I think. There are so many more. We can do a lot in terms of what information, personal history we've got from people in the group. It's amazing. So,
is it possible to have names on those photographs? I was thinking about.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I think names, because you know what, people might see that I think, hang on, I know that.
Yeah.
You know, someone's related to that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
sometimes not the photograph so much they might recognise, but the name that they may do, or even the village in Cyprus where they're from,
Yeah.
and who's posted it. I just think it's good to give that sort of background as well.
I
we
agree.
we can do
We can do that. That'd be great.
Definitely.
And I think a film is a great idea.
Yeah.
The one that when I was researching myself, you know, there wasn't much out there, but the one I forgot the name of the Turkish African Turk. Do you remember the man who did the research on his own village? There's this village in Cyprus, Turkey, which is exclusively African Turks.
Yeah.
Have you seen that film?
From Turkey.
Yes.
Mustafa Olpak.
I think it's him. He's died now, sadly.
Mustafa Olpak died, yeah.
But that was a revelation. I mean, you know, people I've shared that with.
Yeah, in fact, the inspiration, I mean, when I and Serap formed the Afro Cypriot group, the inspiration came from the Afro Turks, Mustafa Olpak and so on. So we thought, why don't we, form an Afro Cypriot group? That's how we did it. And I think it's been lacking in terms of our connection with the Afro Turks. Has been lacking. So that's another area we can develop more connection, more links with the group. Yeah, that's great. So I can see some messages coming from Yusuf and Anthony saying that it will be great if we can have a studio discussion, but obviously we are going into lockdown again and so on, so challenging times. Hopefully we will. Hopefully we will do a better discussion in a studio. Thanks very much, Meral, Florenza, the other guests. Thanks very much indeed. It's been illuminating. It's been
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope Gulay perhaps can put the slides show again. It will be great to look at those pictures again.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
My auntie in two of those, my Taser.
Well, I was saying, I know this one.
You know her. She only died last year at 103.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to see her photograph.
Yeah, so many people we know.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, you two.
Thank
you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Good night.
Good night.